This video is to help you understand the tissues flashcards that you'll be tested over this week. Some of the chapters in our book are just lists of things to memorize. There's not really much to explain. That's chapter 5, which is tissues, chapter 8, which is bones, and chapter 11, which is muscles. So for these chapters, you just have flashcards to study. And rather than give you all the flashcards at once and have to memorize a bunch of flashcards in 1 week, I broke them up throughout the semester. So that's why you're doing tissues, chapter 5, right now in the first week of class. So go to your book, go to chapter 5, and follow along there while I explain a little bit about tissues. You should also get a blank sheet of paper and copy down the information that's on your screen right now. So tissues are groups of cells. All of your organs are made of tissues. And there are 4 main types of tissue in the body. You have epithelium, which covers surfaces. You have connective tissue, which supports, protects, and binds. And it is the most abundant, most diverse, and most widespread tissue in the body. Then you have muscle, which is a tissue that contracts, and nervous, which is used for communication. In this first set of tissues flashcards, we're going to focus on the epithelium. So follow along there in chapter 5. There's a page where it shows you the different shapes of epithelial cells. You see you have squamous, which is flat, kind of looks like a fried egg. Cuboidal, which is square or cube-shaped. Columnar, which is tall like a column. And then there's also transitional, which are cells that can change shape. So when we're looking at epithelium, the first thing we want to know is what shape is it? The next thing to look at is how many layers. Think of like a brick wall, how there's layers. Epithelium can be simple, which means there's 1 layer. It can be stratified, which means it has multiple layers. Or it can be pseudostratified, which means it's 1 layer, but it looks like multiple layers. Then there's a 3rd level of division here. Get to the green level here of your notes. When an epithelial tissue is stratified squamous, it has to be characterized as either keratinized or non-keratinized. So if it's keratinized, that means the cells are filled with keratin. You may recognize that's the protein that's in your hair, skin, and nails. If they're not filled with keratin, then they're called non-keratinized. When it comes to simple columnar and pseudostratified columnar, those cells might be ciliated. So cilia are little hair-like structures on the surface of a cell, and they're used to move things. So for example, in your airways, you have ciliated cells. There's mucus in your airways that's there to trap dust and dirt in the air and keep it out of your lungs. Well, then you just have all this dirty mucus sitting in your airways. So the cilia push that dirty mucus up to your throat. You then swallow it, it goes to your stomach, and your stomach acid destroys it. Every once in a while, it's a big gob of dirty mucus that comes up, and that's where loogies come from. Another example is in the fallopian tube. In order for the egg to get from the ovary to the uterus, there are cilia that push it along. So cilia are used to move a substance. A few other key words here. Apical means top and basal means bottom. So cilia always occur on the apical surface of a cell. They're at the top of the cell. Also, when you're talking about layers, you can use apical and basal. So apical is the top layer in stratified epithelium. Basal is the bottom layer in a stratified epithelium. And sometimes a tissue will have 2 different shapes of cells. The top cells, the apical ones, will be 1 shape, and the basal cells will be another shape. Anytime you're looking at a tissue and you have those 2 different shapes like that, go with the shape of the apical cells. And one other note, microvilli are little projections on the surface of a cell that increase its surface area so it can have more absorption. So for example, in your small intestine, that's where you absorb nutrients from your food. So you have microvilli there. So don't mix up microvilli and cilia. Cilia are used to move a substance. Microvilli are used to absorb something. And a cell can't have both. So anytime you're told that a cell has microvilli, you can eliminate that it has cilia. Okay, if you flip through chapter 5, you'll see there are these tables showing you all the different types of epithelium. This chart that I've made will help you work through that table and identify the epithelia. So we're going to look at the flashcards now, and I'm going to show you how to use this chart. So with this chart, we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to work our way up to build your answers. Okay, so we start off here. 2 or more layers of cells. Apical cells as tall as they are wide. Protects and secretes. Found in ducts of most exocrine glands and part of male urethra. Well, if you look at our first clue here, 2 or more layers. So that tells us it's stratified. So we know stratified is going to be part of our answer. Apical cells, which means that's the top layer of cells. And remember, you always use the shape of the top layer. As tall as they are wide. So think about which kind of shape is as tall as it is wide. Well, that's what a square is, or a cube. So now we know that it's cuboidal. So if we look back here at our chart, we have stratified cuboidal epithelium. So if we flip this over to see the answer, stratified cuboidal epithelium. Okay, here we have single layer of thin, flat cells specialized for rapid diffusion, filtration, some secretion in serous membranes. So it's single layer, that tells us that it's simple, and it says thin, flat cells. Well, that's a description of squamous. This is found in the air sacs, lines the lumen of lymph and blood vessels, and serous membranes of body cavities. So if we use our chart, we have simple squamous epithelium. There you go. Okay, contracts. Go back up in your chart to the 4 main types. That is muscle. Muscle contracts. Okay, here we have a picture. So let's analyze this picture. And in these pictures, there's always a cell that's outlined. So you can see this black line here and this cell that is outlined. Okay, so if we look at the shape of that, that is squamous. It's kind of a flattened cell. You can also see here we have lots of layers. So this is stratified. So if you look over at our chart, we have squamous, we have stratified. Now notice whenever you have squamous stratified, you have to go down another branch and determine if it's keratinized or non-keratinized. In these cells, notice there's clear spots that you can see through. Notice also the dark purple dots, those are the nuclei of the cells. So we can see the nucleus inside the cell. There's clear areas where we can see through the cell. That means this cell is not filled with keratin. If it were filled with keratin, all you would see is the keratin that fills it. So this is non-keratinized. So we have here non-keratinized, so follow your chart, non-keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. Okay, here's a picture. Again, look at the cell that is outlined here. That is another squamous cell. And this is a cross-section of the lungs. And the lungs have all these millions of tiny air sacs. So the white area here is where the air goes in your lungs. The purple is the cells. So this cell doesn't have any other cells stacked on top of it. So this is squamous and it is simple. So if we follow our chart, we're going to go simple squamous epithelium. Notice with the chart, you start at the bottom and you just move up the chart to build the name of the tissue. Okay, now we have single layer of cells taller than they are wide, may have microvilli, performs absorption and secretion in the lining of most of the digestive tract. So, single layer tells us that it's simple, taller than they are wide. That's a column, so columnar. Okay, so we have columnar, we have simple. Now notice here we have to decide if it's ciliated or non-ciliated. If you have columnar simple, you have that next branch, ciliated or non-ciliated. Well, it tells us they may have microvilli. And if you come back down here to our note, notice we have that a cell can't have both microvilli and cilia. So since it does have microvilli, we're going to call it non-ciliated. So if we start at the bottom and build our answer, we have non-ciliated, simple, columnar epithelium. 2 or more layers of cells. Well, that right away tells you it's stratified. Apical cells taller than they are wide. So taller than it is wide is a column. Protects and secretes found in larger ducts of salivary glands and membranous part of male urethra. So we have columnar and we have stratified. So if you start at the bottom of the chart and work your way up, that's stratified columnar epithelium. Single layer of cells that are as tall as they are wide. Single layer, simple. As tall as they are wide, cuboidal. So, simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, here's another picture. Notice our cell that is outlined. That is a column shape. It's a tall cell. The darker spots are nuclei. See how you have a row of nuclei here and a row of nuclei here? That means we have 2 layers of cells, so this is stratified. So this is a stratified columnar. And notice here, the stratified does not have that next branch, that green that I wrote for ciliated or non-ciliated. So all we have for our answer here is stratified columnar epithelium. All right, here's a picture. Look at your outlined cell. It's another column. And the dark spots are the nuclei. Notice the nuclei are in nice, neat rows like they were in the last picture, right? In this picture, you have a nice, neat row, a nice, neat row. Here, look at the nuclei. They're just scattered all over the place. When they're scattered all over the place, that means it's pseudostratified. It's actually just one layer of cells. And the way that pseudostratified can trick you is if you have a tall cell and then a short cell and then another tall cell. You could have a nucleus here and a nucleus here and a nucleus here. That looks like it's different layers, but it's actually just one layer. You just have shorter cells in amongst the taller cells. That's how it gets tricky. So this one is pseudostratified. It's columnar. Now remember here, if it's columnar and pseudostratified, we have to decide if it's ciliated or not. Well, if we look here, I don't see anything on the surface of the cell that looks like little hairs. So this is non-ciliated. So we start at the bottom of the chart and we work up to build our name. So we have non-ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Okay. Look at the outlined cell. That's a column. So it's columnar. Look at the nuclei. Nice, neat row. Now this kind of wraps around and then it goes over here, but see how you have some different stuff in the middle here? So that's not 2 rows. This is 1 row and the tissue itself kind of folds back around. But those nice straight nuclei mean that this is a single row, so this is simple. And remember, with simple, we have to decide ciliated or non-ciliated. We'll look at these little hairs on the surface here. This is ciliated. So we have ciliated simple columnar epithelium. Okay, multiple layers of cells, stratified. Basal cells cuboidal, while apical cells squamous. So now we have to come back down here to these rules. Remember, apical is top layer, basal is bottom layer. Go with apical when given 2 shapes. So we're going to say squamous. We always take the shape of the apical. So this is stratified squamous. And notice here, squamous, stratified, we have to decide if it's keratinized or non-keratinized. Superficial cells are alive and moist, protection of underlying tissue. Okay, a keratinized cell is going to be dead because if a cell is completely filled with keratin, it doesn't have anything else that needs to be alive and it dies. So if the cells are alive, they're non-keratinized. Okay. Most abundant, diverse, widely distributed, protects, supports, binds. That is connective tissue. Okay, this picture. Up here, the dark red is the part we're looking at. And remember, when they make slides, they stain things. So this isn't the natural colors of things in your body. But pretty much all you see here is just almost solid red. This is our keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. This is a picture of the surface of the skin. So all of that red is because these cells are filled with keratin and the keratin stained red. And that's why you can't really see anything else. It's just solid keratin. Okay, look at our shape. This is a column. Look at the nuclei. There's not nice, neat rows. They're kind of scattered around. That's your sign that it's pseudostratified. And then if you look up here, we have little hairs. So if we follow our chart, we have ciliated, pseudostratified, columnar epithelium. Single layer of cells of varying heights. Remember, varying heights, short ones between tall ones? That's your clue to pseudostratified. All cells connected to basement membrane, but not all cells reach apical surface. So that's just another way of saying all of the cells have the same bottom, but not all of them have the same top. So some are taller, some are shorter. So looks like multiple layers. Provides protection and movement of mucus across the apical surface. So notice there, it's moving mucus. So this is going to be our ciliated, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Cover surfaces, epithelium. Multiple layers of cells, stratified. Basal cells cuboidal, while apical cells squamous. So again, remember, you always go with the apical, so we're going to say squamous. Superficial cells dead and filled with keratin. Single layer cells of varying heights, all cells connected to basement membrane, but not all reach apical surface, so it looks like multiple layers. That's your pseudostratified. And notice it doesn't tell us anything else. It says provides protection in part of male urethra and epididymis. But if we know that it is pseudostratified columnar, notice pseudostratified has to be columnar. You don't see pseudostratified anywhere else. So if it tells you, if you figure out from the clues that it's pseudostratified, you automatically know that it's columnar. So that's how we know the shape of it, even though it doesn't tell us anything about shape. Then we have to decide if it's ciliated or non-ciliated. Well, it doesn't say anything about moving something. Remember, the last one said it moves mucus. This one mentions nothing about movement. It says it provides protection. So we're going to go with non-ciliated. Okay. Layers of cells. When relaxed, apical cells rounded. When distended, apical cells flattened. So notice what's going on here. The apical cells change shape. They can either be rounded or flattened. This is our transitional. It's the apical cells are changing shape based on what's going on with the tissue. And this is found in the urinary system. So as the urinary bladder fills, it stretches, and that stretching makes the cells flatten. Then when you go to the bathroom and empty your bladder, it shrinks. That shrinking makes the cells rounded. Okay, look at the outline. That's a square, so this is cuboidal. Look at your nice, neat rows of nuclei. So this is stratified. Here's the urinary bladder we were just talking about. See this top picture? The bladder is empty and it's small. And look at those apical cells. They kind of have this nice fluffy shape. Here in the bottom, here's the bladder where it's full and the cells are stretched. And you can see they take on this flattened shape. Communication, that's nervous. Okay, here's a columnar cell. Here are our nuclei in a nice neat row. This is a different tissue here, so we're only paying attention to this. So we have a single layer of columns, and I don't see any cilia here. Okay. Here's a cube, and this one is a single row of cubes, so this one is simple. Okay, single layer, simple. Ciliated cells, look back here. If it's ciliated, it has to be columnar. None of the other shapes have ciliated as an option. And it also tells us that it has oocyte movement, which that's just the scientific name for the egg, through the uterine tubes or fallopian tubes. Okay, so that is all of the flashcards for Tissues 1. So again, here's this picture. You should print this out or write this down on a piece of paper. Use the chart, start at the bottom, work your way up to build your answers for the tissues. Remember to refer to Chapter 5 in your book for more explanation on the tissues.